POV. A new game comes out. Your friends are all talking about it. You're excited to pick that game up. You get it day one. Throw $500 plus tax out the window so you can play the hottest new thing and talk about it with your boys. But your worst fear comes true. It's me. The game just isn't hitting right with you for some reason. It's too long, has way too much monotonous shit in it, or is paced very terribly. God forbid it's a live service game that wants to eat away at your attention span and time. But you want to be part of the conversation at the Denny's table with your boys, so you keep playing. What you've been hit with is some sincere FOMO, so much so that you decided to forgo your own opinion in the name of being validated at the Denny's table with your boys, and also maybe the thought that maybe the game will get good. That being said, I'm gonna ask you something entirely obvious here. Was that game even really worth your time? Something that has been crossing my mind a lot more in the past few years, especially as games have gotten bigger and more demanding from their audiences, is the thought of actually finishing the games that I start. Time has gotten so short for me to actually play things. At least it feels that way in concept as life gets more and more busy. So the idea of a game wasting my time has become very apparent lately. It's because of this thought that I'd really like to explore what pushes us to drop the games we played that we may be actually interested in, why we finish the games we do in the first place, but like also I think I just want to talk about the stupid shit in games that make me mad. Okay, cool. So the answer of why we finish games in the first place is actually very simple, on a psychological level anyways. The Zeigarnik effect, the concept that humans remember unfinished tasks more than we do completed ones, essentially explains why we feel the drive to finish games, even if we may not like them. The more you do of a task or game also further strengthens the memory of said task or game, and takes a whole lot more to properly forget the task. We as humans also just have an inherent need for closure that drives us to finish the games we start. But what's more interesting is the things that keep us playing that are baked into the design of the game, whether it be in a positive way or in the gross, stupid, icky Genshin Impact way. Games keep us going by not only being fun, but by also giving us tasks that are engaging, testing us, and having worthwhile incentives to keep us going. In other words, other than purely being fun, the largest thing that keeps us going is the progression behind games. It's the leveling systems, how you go from one area to the next, the shit that makes you feel like you did something and gives you the dopamine to keep playing. In a good video game, take, I don't know, A Hat in Time, the game where you get your soul sucked away without you installing the gacha game your favorite YouTuber is advertising. You have a very good sense of progression here. This is a game pretty similar in structure to the 3D Mario titles, where progression basically entails entering a level, doing objective, and collecting a timepiece to finish things off and fuel your ship. And it's this constant charm, varied set of ideas, and more focused set pieces that make A Hat in Time one of the easiest games to finish. It is very rare where collecting all the timepieces feels like a chore here. Aside from maybe having to hunt down a bunch of yarn for various hats on occasion, you will likely never feel like your time has been wasted on random bullshit playing this game, and it's awesome for that. What gives a good sense of progression is very game dependent though, and something more complex than a platformer like an RPG. Multiple systems are going to be building off and interacting with each other. Persona has its life simulator elements that bleed into its dungeon crawling, letting you get stronger by being a better person. The early Paper Mario games have the badge systems that reward experimentation and holding on for dear life in battles. And then many other titles have their own gameplay progression systems that make you want to engage and get stronger to make funny numbers go up. On top of many times providing stories unlike anything else you'll find in video games. And something more structured, like a competitive multiplayer game, its progression is much simpler. It's unlocking characters in Mario Kart or weapons in Splatoon type shit. If you're lame, it's the experience you get in Fortnite in your battle pass. What I'm getting at here is that the games that we actually finish are the ones that make us feel like we're accomplishing something. And for the ones that can actually be finished or roll credits on, it's the ways in which we progress that actually get us to finish them. But like, have you ever considered that video games really want to waste your time? systems I mentioned thus far are the ones that I consider good, but the thing is, progression systems can play a role in why we wouldn't finish the game too. And as the one playing it, you're completely justified if you walk away from the game if you don't feel like you're having fun anymore. I think we've all heard of the grind in video games, where you do a certain task over and over in an attempt to actually progress or unlock something because you couldn't do it playing normally. Unless you're just a total freak, most of the loser nerds in the room probably think of RPGs when they think about grinding. Shit, killing tons of enemies, hearing or whatever battle theme over and over. Also, you can get your shit rocked by the boss that, believe it or not, is still hard even when your numbers go up. It's also the mind-numbing task too. If I have to go up and down to different floors for the chance that one of these fuck-ass stamps will appear, all while listening to the most grating shit ever, find my ass in that Denny's, I will be in the conversation. It's not even just the RPGs though. Have you ever tried to unlock the fucking bat in the $80 racing game? Or better yet, what if I told you collecting all 900 Korok seeds in Breath of the Wild gave you a literal piece of shit? I don't think I really need to explain the inherent problem with grinding, but it's my video and you clicked on the video to hear a random white guy talk about random shit. Grinding is the easiest way to kill a game's pacing. Any momentum or enjoyment you felt from that game kind of goes out the window. The game looks you dead in the eye and tells you to get in the hamster wheel and start running. Actually, I think it's time we talked about pacing really, because when a game has bad pacing, that's kind of when most people want to quit. Pacing in video games is essentially the same as it would be in every other piece of media. Does this part of the game go by too fast? Does it go by too slow? Is the game just faster than others, or am I actually going insane? It's probably the insanity part. It's how the game makes use of its runtime to push you towards its goals, and it's something that's really hard to get right. In something like Splatoon, the faster pace of matches really works in its favor, since it feels like you're constantly in the action. There's no spending 20 minutes doing nothing just to die. Risk of Rain's pacing is decided entirely by the timer, what enemies you kill, and when you decide to leave, and it's kinda awesome. A lot of the Mario platformers have essentially mastered the pacing of each individual level, always building on ideas and knowing exactly where to end the level, but that's kinda if you're lucky. Fucking up pacing is one of the top reasons for dropping games. If I had to point fingers and say you suck to any given game with bad pacing, I'm doing it to this one. Mario and Luigi Brothership is the game I think of in recent years with some abysmal pacing. What do you mean my funny Wahoo Man RPG takes 5 hours to get to the first boss fight? What do you mean you don't get another bros attack until like 12 hours in? What do you mean this game is 50 hours? Dude, I thought Mario and Luigi just wasn't for me anymore. But no, this game is just way too damn long. But Luke, I hear no one saying, the game gets really good near the end. Dude, I don't care. This isn't One Piece. It takes 10 hours to get to the main gimmick of the game. I think I have the right to bitch. Look, I think a lot of the stuff this game does to reboot the series is pretty neat, but the length it takes to truly get going is fucking absurd, especially with how formulaic this game's islands are. Not the first time Mario RPGs have been fucking wacky with their pacing, they really put us in a hamster wheel to make a point. Pacing kind of makes or breaks a lot of RPGs though. It's why a lot of them are very niche and might not speak to general audiences. They're slower paced typically, and unless you have Keanu Reeves in it, you're probably not going guns blazing doing parkour in these games. But what about the games where progression and pacing are both thrown out the window? I again hear no one asking. Well, dear viewer who probably isn't paying attention, boy do I have the stupid fucking predatory gambling games for you. Gacha games are notorious for the grind. They took a look at the innocent customer who just wants to support their favorite franchises in the eye and say, you'd pay 40 real life dollars for Diddy Kong, right? By drip feeding rewards through such meaningful tasks such as talking to an NPC or opening a random treasure chest, you can really smell the corporate greed coming off of these games. These games always tend to have like a dozen currencies. Also, you can upgrade sometimes very questionable anime characters, or even gamble to get new ones. And no, this shit isn't cheap or common either. The profit comes from the premium currency to do those gambling pulls, just so you can get a new character and throw away more time upgrading them all the way. All this to exploit player bases in the name of making big dollar signs go up. Dude, the fact there are systems involved that eventually just give you a rare pull, called the pity system, is absolutely unhinged. Anyway, gambling is not really the point here. There's plenty of other better videos about the predatory nature of gacha games. My question is, have you ever noticed that every game like this is trying to steal our time away? Daily quests and events in gacha games are there to increase FOMO and get you logging on every day. They repeatedly lock progression behind some kind of system that requires you to wait real-life hours for your currency to recharge. If you're playing a Hoyoverse game, you do so much fucking grinding that it can take actual months before you max out a single character. The list goes on and on about how the definitely not gambling games are definitely predatory to you financially and your time on this planet. It makes me more upset that one of my favorite games got turned into one of these financial nightmares. It's not even just gacha games at this point. It feels like every massively updated game lately is desperately trying to suck our time away. The industry calls these live service games, but to me, these are lifestyle games. Everything games that exist to get the most money and time out of its players. And like, I get it. These games definitely need players to stay up and running, but your average college student who is broke and has very little time is not going to appreciate when Mr. Grizz tells me that I can't have that piece of gear unless I grind for literal hundreds of hours, or that I have to shell over my credit card to get a Fortnite skin. See, I'm glad these games exist because they're fun times with my friends, but I really don't like thinking about how these games are literally designed for me to be on them every day for multiple hours of my day for daily bonuses or missions or whatever. All this to say is that you don't owe it to the devs or to the publishers to play their games, or even finish them. There are a lot of games to play, and we only have a limited amount of time on this earth before we, die. So play what you want, actually, but just make sure that your time is valued, and most of all, that you're having fun. The industry seems so obsessed with making the biggest and longest games ever. It's almost as though they're designed to fill out an hour count. It's why open world games are so stale, as good as they are. They're time sinks of hundreds of hours, and in cases like my experience with Zelda, it's hard to feel like the time is warranted, But like, that's just the design of it. Have you even considered the opinions of your friends when you start saying at the Denny's table that you haven't finished Outer Wilds? I think when it comes to single-player titles especially, there's always some kind of outside factor that forces people to finish games. I feel the most common thing I see a lot of people do with video games, and even other media, is the backlog. A list of games that, I'll get to later when there's nothing else to play, but instead you just go back to playing Fortnite with your boys. It just kind of builds and builds until it becomes unmanageable and you just never play anything on it. See, I have one of these. It's not very long, and I don't really do anything with it a lot of the time, except for my recent playthrough of Nier Automata. And it's because I really don't like backlogs, unless it's something I'm really truly interested in that I put on the list. The issue with a list like this is that a lot of people feel the need to finish everything on it, which is dangerous, since if you're not a fan, you're either probably forcing yourself to finish it or doing the healthy option of dropping it. You're turning a hobby into a checklist, essentially, and if you don't ground yourself with the idea that some of these games might not be for you, even if you had interest in them, your hobby will become a chore and something you ultimately dread doing. You kind of have to approach the backlog with the mindset that you might not be interested after a certain point, to avoid the whole please kill me now feeling when you're playing. It's all about knowing your limits and tastes, and if you don't like something after hour 20 with it, you're probably not gonna like it at hour 50 either. Don't get me wrong though, I think the early hours of Xenoblade 2 are boring as shit, but they get really good later on, and it's taken me 3 attempts to properly get into Outer Wilds. I definitely think there's merit to the whole it gets good after episode 400 shtick, but it's also okay to just not be okay with that. I know I personally would lose my mind if I fully committed to everything I started playing. It's kind of just ultimately up to us to decide where we spend our time. The argument that a game can get good after X amount of hours kind of just kills any and all enjoyment for doing a backlog though. If fully committing to finishing games was part of a backlog, I honestly do not see anyone actually going through with completing them. I think there's a social aspect to why we finish games too, whether it be out of pure recommendation or just societal pressure to have an opinion. That first one sounds a lot healthier to me, but let's talk about the second one for a minute. I've definitely blocked out a lot of the rumblings like this, but I remember there used to be this strong notion of your opinion isn't valid unless you finish said piece of media. Actually, let me back this up. Have you ever noticed that YouTube video essays will always point out their hour count or that they've been a fan of said thing for years? I do it a lot too, and it's because of credibility purposes, which to an extent I can kind of get behind. If I were to open an hour-long retrospective about 3D Mario or something, and the only game I've played was the one where Mario gets incarcerated for no reason, I feel you'd probably raise an eyebrow. Credibility is really important when you're talking about something as broad as that. But this expectation for some reason still exists when it's a single game too. Like if a person were to play 4 hours of a 20+ hour long game and dropped it, then their opinion isn't valid anymore, which is a sentiment I really don't understand. The length of playing a game enough to give thoughts about it should never be the finish line. It definitely helps when it is, and I think it is something we should strive for, but only if you actually like the game. If you don't like the game, it should be a perfectly valid option to just drop it and move on. Not to say you could just play a game for 20 minutes. If you think you could just open a game and drop it instantly, I'm not talking to you. Go play Fortnite or something. I'm talking about those who struggle with the need to have an opinion on something that they just don't like, trudging through more than they have to. What counts as a fair chance for any given game heavily depends on what game you're talking about. If it's an RPG, those really do take a decent amount of time to get going. But if it's something smaller in scope, a fair shot is probably a smaller amount of time. All this to say, if you don't like a game or a piece of media after you feel like you gave it a proper shot, I promise you by the finish line, you will probably still not like it. And it is completely okay to have that negative opinion of a piece of media. You could voice that opinion for sure, but it's definitely important to give context behind the opinion, especially if you didn't finish that game. There's also always the fear that you're missing out if you drop it, the what if it gets good that comes with someone or people recommending you something, and that's where the personal choice kind of has to come into play, because there are definitely games like that. Outer Wilds is a game that I haven't finished enough to understand the hype. I feel the need to come back because I feel if I were to properly give it the time it deserves, I will truly love it. But there are definitely limits to it. In those situations, you kind of just have to gauge your own actual interest in the thing you're consuming. If you dislike the game enough that you don't really want to play it anymore, just drop it. If you haven't lost interest despite not liking what you played so far, then this is where you kind of need to take in the context and ask yourself if it's still worth playing. That's kind of what you should get from this video. You do not owe it to anyone to finish games, especially if you are not enjoying them. Not to the large corporations you gave money to, not to the devs, not to your friends, and certainly not to the little Timmy on social media that got pissed at you for not finishing the funny robot ass game. It's okay to stop playing something if you don't like it. You just need to do whatever you need to do to feel as though your time is well spent. It's also important to realize and properly understand that certain games and publishers do not respect your time or your money, and you thought $80 Mario Kart was bad. Without getting too real, the reason this is the video that I decided to make after so long is because of time. Due to general workaholism, stress, and fuck it, I'll be honest, this year has been kinda nothing but me working, and very little of my actual hobbies has been happening lately. Needless to say, I'm a little exhausted by all of it actually. It's made me think a lot about how I spend my time, and part of that has been noticing in video games that didn't bother me before, suddenly were really annoying. Normally shit that eats into my time. But now, after not getting to enjoy a single player game in months, and also not feeling motivated to continue learning the thing I know I love doing, I've been trying to take a step back and just take in games again. I've been playing a lot of Mario Kart World on my own. Not on my Switch, I'm broke as fuck. This is my friend's Switch. And it's a little ironic that this is the game that came out when I was writing this video, since it feels so designed to not be completable. You just drive, explore the world, and have fun doing a sick trick along the way. Outside of just races anyway. I don't know if it's the lack of any real indicator of what you've collected and how much there is, or just the incredible soundtrack, but this game has been very relaxing. Just chilling out, driving around, appreciating the vibes. Who am I kidding though? It's definitely the soundtrack that's bringing me back. The idea I do not want to get across with this video is that video games are a waste of time, because they're not, and they never will be. They provide some of the most engaging, fun, and memorable experiences with your friends or by yourself, but we do need to be aware of when we are no longer interested so that this hobby stays as fun as it is for as long as possible. And like, I hope no one takes this as a I'm telling you what to do with your time? You can do what you want. I don't really care. You can do what you want when you want, but I just hope, if anything, that when you're next trying out a game from your backlog or out of a recommendation from a friend, you thoroughly enjoy it. And if you don't, you make the best course of action to respect your time properly, even if it means dropping it. Unless it's a gacha game, you might want to just play something else then.